This is RTE FM3 Classical Radio at 8 o'clock. Now, Aspects of Opera, the first in a series of programmes in which Ted Courtney explores a favourite opera. This week, it's Puccini's La Boheme.
Good evening, and you're all very welcome to join me, Ted Courtney, over the next few weeks, where we'll explore together all aspects of opera, the plot or libretto, the dramatics, joy, sorrow, all combining together to lift up our spirits. You know, to me, opera is an imitation of life, and perhaps the only time when you can leave your troubles outside where they belong. They don't matter now. Today's opera? Puccini's masterpiece, La Boheme, which is a story about bohemian life in Paris. This opera was first staged exactly 100 years ago, but the action takes place even earlier. Let me take you all back to Paris in 1830. Now, we must remember that Paris those days was the place where budding young artists flocked together with dreams of fame and fortune, but only for a tiny few. But cold and hunger for the rest, fueled only by that driving ambition which is the curse of fame. It's important to know a little about the characters. We mustn't get too bogged down with that, though, because the background and the characters are really only secondary. What makes an opera what it is the music. The opera is based largely, but not completely, on Henry Murger's novel Scenes from the Life of a Bohemian, and the main characters, well, we'll start with the girls. Mimi, soprano, the diva. A poor seamstress living alone, as pure as the driven snow, or as pure as her pretty white hands. You'll hear a lot about these hands. In Murger's book, she's not quite the angel Puccini suggests, but I'm with Puccini on this one. Musetta, also a soprano. This is unusual. I'd expect an alto for, how shall I say, a girl of this sort, a bold girl. I might even go as far as saying a lady of easy virtue. Now the men. Rodolfo, tenor, a writer, but his latest play has been refused by almost every theatre in Paris. The script does get a hot reception, though, but not in the way you'd expect. Marcello, baritone, the painter, been working for some time on his picture, The Passage of the Red Sea. He's tried to sell it so often outside the Louvre. If the thing had wheels, it could make its own way to the Louvre. Schaunard, baritone, the musician. His only gig is to play the scale of C major all day as a sort of counter-irritant to a talking parrot in the next apartment of his employer, a sort of human ghetto blaster. Schaunard has asked that the parrot should be poisoned with parsley, but to no avail. Colline, the bass, the philosopher, he has a heart of gold, which is good, because it's all the gold he has. Not much money in philosophy. Now remember, all of these are men of letters. Now the voices you're about to hear can vibrate the air we breathe like nothing you've ever heard before. So let's listen and enjoy together, you there and me here, as the story unfolds musically and dramatically before us, under the caring genius of Giacomo Puccini. Now the curtain rises and the stage is set. We see Rodolfo the writer and Marcello the painter in somewhat reduced circumstances in a garret high above Paris. It has a large window through which we can see the rooftops and smoking chimneys of Paris. Snow is everywhere. You see, it's Christmas Eve. And to make matters worse, the stove doesn't work. Now, there is no real overture to speak of. Instead, Puccini opens with what I can only describe as a pounding of the orchestra. Ba-dum-bum-bum, ba-dum-bum-bum. Puccini makes great play with this little motif, and Rodolfo and Marcello curse the cold, women, and love, and hunger. Now, the pounding from the orchestra is a pounding in 3/8 time, but it's sweetened by a more tender melody in 6/8 time, a sort of barcarolle. Da-da-da-dum, da-dee-da-dum, ba-dum-bum. Listen as Puccini mirrors the emotion of the two scholars in the opening.
Questo mar rosso mia molisce assidera. Come se addosso mi piovesse in stile. vendicarmi a fuoco in faraone. Che fai? Nei cieli vigi guardo fumata mille comincio di Parigi e penso a quel poltrone del vecchio caminetto ingannatore che vive in ozio come un gran signor. Le sue rendite oneste da un pezzo non riceve, moleste che va sotto la neve. Rodolfo, io voglio dirti un mio pensiero profondo, un freddo cane, ed io ma ciel non ti nascondo che non credo al sudor della fronte. O ghiacciate le dita, quasi ancora le tene simulate, giù quella gran ghiacciaia che il cuore d'insetta. L'amore è un camminetto che sciupa troppo in fretta, dove l'uomo è facile e la donna è la lode. L'una brucia in un soffio e l'altro sta.
These melodies will be heard many times during the opera. Now it's cold. It's so cold that instead of sitting on a chair, they decide to burn it. What next for heat? Marcello's painting, perhaps? No, the paint would smell. How about Rodolfo's play? He'll sacrifice it to the gods. The paper will give heat, and the smoke will rise to the heavens, and the inspiration will return from whence it came. The age will suffer an irreparable literary loss, and ignorance will be their punishment. Remember, these are Bohemians. And the motto is art for art's sake, money for God's sake, or in this case, heat. Now, the nice part. Rodolfo meets and falls in love with Mimi, a poor seamstress. They meet by chance, even though they live in the same house. But it's a French tenement run by Benoit, who's always looking for the rent that never comes, especially from his worst four tenants, Rodolfo, Marcello, Colline, and Schaunard. Rodolfo is now alone. The others have gone to the Café Momus. He tries to write, but's not in the mood. Suddenly, there's a timid knock on the door. It's Mimi telling him her light has gone out. He invites her in, but she says there is no need. He pleads with her. She enters, but dragging, and has a fit of coughing and faints. He doesn't know what to do, but he sprinkles water on her face and she comes to. She explains that the stairs were too much for her, but she's all right now and bids him good night. After a short intro on the flute and strings, the accompaniment is in long phrases, but just occasionally doubles with the singers to add to the tender moment.
Non sono in vela, una donna ecco s'accomodi un momento, la prego, entri. Si sente male, nulla, impallidisce, il respiro, quelle scale. Ed ora come faccio? Così che viso d'ammalata. Si sente meglio? Sì. Qui c'è tanto freddo, segga vicino al fuoco. aspetti un po' di vino.
Grazie.
A lei
Poco.
così.
Grazie.
Che bella bambina.
Ora permetta che accenda il lume tutto passato.
Tanta fretta.
Sì. Grazie. Buonasera.
Buonasera.
But she now reappears at the door. She has lost her key, and her candle has gone out again. Rodolfo hastens to her with his candle, but his goes out too, and they are both in darkness. They hunt for the key, touch the floor with their hands. He finds it and pockets it, and is drawn to her by her voice. Listen to the pulse in the orchestra. The heartbeat has risen. Cupid has struck. It's too late.
Non stia sull'uscio, il lume si lamenta. Oddio, anche il mio sospento. Buio pesto, vi sarà. Male pare, cosa dice male pare? Cerco, no, in verità. Cerco,
Their hands meet on a pizzicato there in the orchestra with an ah from Mimi. He keeps her hand in his, but it's cold. Your tiny hand is frozen, he sings to her. Let me warm it for you. Why search for the key? We'll never find it in the dark, but look at the moon. Do you know, I like this guy's technique. He sings to Mimi about his life and his dreams. Slightly muted violins, with harp dripping down its notes like an icicle shedding water, and a melody, a haunting melody, so joyously typical of Puccini.
gelida manina, se la lasci riscaldar, cercar che giova al buio non si trova. Ma per fortuna è una notte di luna, e qui la luna l'abbiamo vicina. Aspetti, signorina, le dirò con due parole. Chissà che faccia come vivo. Chi son? Chi son?
now Mimi, whose real name is Lucia, sings of her life and her dreams to the accompaniment of tender endearments from the orchestra. First the strings doubling with her voice, then with chords, violins, flute and harp. This gives way to a livelier pulse as she sings, I live all by myself, and I eat all alone. Listen here for pizzicato in the strings, again with flute and harp, then returns to the passionate opening on Mimi's voice, with just the right amount of vibrato. Do you know, I think this voice is as near perfect as is humanly possible. And the voice, Victoria de Los Angeles. The three lads call from below, but Rodolfo tells them to go. He'll join them later. Rodolfo and Mimi have fallen in love, and to show this, Puccini blends both voices together, first in unison and then in counterpoint and harmony, and they go out together and join the others at the Café Momus, and their voices fade into the distance.
Dammi il braccio, mia piccina.
The second act is staged in the heart of the Latin Quarter. Remember, it's Christmas Eve and there's joy and laughter everywhere. Rodolfo and Mimi are enjoying their newfound happiness. The happy pair light upon the other Bohemians just after Marcello, Colline and Schaunard have come out of the cafe carrying a table to dine out of doors in true French style, even though it is in the depth of winter. Listen to the tingling on the glockenspiel. They don't mind the cold, they're well used to it. Mimi timidly orders custard, and Schaunard, with an air of tremendous importance, bids the waiter bring the best you have for a lady, while Rodolfo becomes poetical in praise of her charms. Here, full orchestra and chorus, and of course, glockenspiel. But peace is shattered when Musetta, an old flame of Marcello, the painter, arrives with Alcindoro, I suppose a sort of sugar daddy. Musetta makes Alcindoro join her at a table near Marcello and tries to make a scene, complaining that her shoe is too tight. To keep her quiet, Alcindoro goes off to the cobbler. But when he returns, the girls and the Bohemians have fled while a band has been passing by, leaving poor Alcindoro with the bill. Now, Musetta is a flirt. Rodolfo gives Mimi a quiet hint that if she ever behaved like that, etc., etc., but she replies that she loves him too much for the question of forgiveness ever to arise between them. In other words, love means never having to say you're sorry. Now, where have we heard that before? Ah yes, Love Story. Remember the movie? Now, we're into Act 3. It is now February. Marcello and Musetta now live at the Barrière d'Enfer, the toll gate where customs officials deal with provisions brought in from the country. Mimi comes to visit to see them, but things are not going well between her and Rodolfo. He's acting very strangely, like that of an insane, jealous lover. Marcello advises Mimi to leave him, but Mimi doesn't realize why he's acting so, and that's the tragedy. He's trying to deal with her illness, and he can't handle it. It's coming between them. Now Musetta, who is the very opposite of Mimi, how shall I say, a bold girl, a girl of easy virtue, that sort of thing, gets up to her old flirting tricks, which causes the relationship with her and Marcello to end. Mimi tells Rodolfo that it's over and requests her belongings. The clarinet introduces traces of familiar melodies of times past. Now, they agree to stay together, if nothing else but to keep warm. To be alone in winter is so awful. But yet again, Puccini harmonizes both voices. The dignity and repose is broken by Marcello and Musetta bursting out of the tavern, and not quietly. Puccini treats us to a quartet of varying moods.
Sorri
4. The curtain rises, and we find ourselves back again where we started, at the garret. Rodolfo and Marcello are now separated from Mimi and Musetta. They've seen other girls and tried to convince themselves that they don't care, but the reality is different. As this duet between Rodolfo tenor and Marcello baritone, the jaunty counterpoint between the two is intended to forget the past. But who are they trying to fool? That jaunty counterpoint gives way to a more melancholy duet, meaning they're still in love with the girls. Puccini embellishes the passion by doubling the voices with full orchestra in a richness that's almost too much. The duet is introduced by the now familiar pounding of the orchestra. Ba-dum-bum-bum.
Grazie per tutto che fa, che non sta a me, ciò non sta a me. Loyola fa, si rodi e ridi, e non batte, bene. Io pur vidi, Musetta, Mimi, l'hai vista, oh guarda, era in carrozza vestita come ne son contento, giorno si strugge d'amor, lavoriam, lavoriam. Che penna infame, che infame penna!
Puccini begs the question, who can choose where the heart leads? Well, I don't think anyone can. Now, they are joined by Schaunard and Colline, the other Bohemians. Suddenly, Musetta arrives with Mimi, who is now dying. Having no money for medicine, Colline decides to pawn his overcoat. He bids farewell to his warm and faithful friend, and Musetta gives her earrings and any other jewellery she has to buy medicine and pay for a doctor. So I suppose she's not really bad after all. The music here becomes almost a death march as the gravity of the situation becomes more obvious. They leave Rodolfo and Mimi alone together, and she sings her last endearment to him with these words. Have they gone? I pretended to sleep because I wanted to be alone with you. I've so many things to tell you, or one thing huge as the sea, deep and infinite as the sea. I love you, you're all my life. Oh, my beautiful Mimi, beautiful as the dawn. You mean sunset, she sings to him. Rodolfo has always kept her bonnet close to his heart, and she was promised a warm muff to keep her tiny hands warm. Musetta gives her the muff, but pretends Rodolfo had given it. In a slightly lighter moment, Mimi tells Rodolfo that she knew all the time that he had pocketed the key when they were searching for it when they first met, and he smiles as he takes her in her arms. I was only helping fate. Now, the final moments of the opera, Mimi takes another fit of coughing. She holds the muff tightly and thanks him again. Thanks her beloved. She sings in faltering accents. Why are you crying like this? Here, beloved, with you always. My hands, the warmth, to sleep. Rodolfo still doesn't know, but her words become a passionate threnody, becoming weaker and weaker, till at last silence. Rodolfo looks around at the faces of his friends and can't understand why they look at him so. Then Marcello embraces him and tells him to be brave. Coraggio! 3 great crashing chords of C-sharp minor explode from the orchestra. And the horns explode. And the awful pain of grief which we all must share. Rodolfo, realizing the awful truth, he cries out to his beloved Mimi. The orchestra cries out too, and our hearts cry out for Mimi as the curtain falls.
là a voi. Come va? Vedi, è tranquilla. Che vuol dire? Quell'andare venire, quel guardarmi così! Coraggio!
Ted Courtney was talking about Puccini's La Boheme in the first of a series called Aspects of Opera. The producer was John Hughes, and next Tuesday evening Ted explores Verdi's La Traviata.